Tonight, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, Spain, why they matter, plus Sharo, Angie Dickinson, and that cool white bird from Beretta for the full hour. It's been a long week. Hello, America. I've been telling you this week about the different scenarios that are playing out, and one of them is really nasty. It's happening in Europe, and I fear that it may happen here next. We need to pay attention to what's happening in Europe and then learn from the mistakes, because we're making the exact same mistakes they've made in places like Greece, who arrogantly racked up debt, see if this sounds familiar, racked up debt, got into bed with unions, have an exploding and bloated government, and racks up a 12% deficit. Well, that's not too much like us, because as you'll see, our deficit is only 9.9. Then Spain tried the green job thing that Van Jones has been pushing. Oh, that worked out so swell for Spain. They now only have 19% unemployment. They learned the lesson that we'll soon learn if we don't stop on this path. You lose 2 jobs for every 1 green job created. Can we just let entrepreneurs create jobs? But the biggest mistake that they have all made is that all of these countries, their politicians lied to the people the entire time. Even now, they're in denial. Officials at the major rating agencies last week downplayed the risk of debt crisis, saying that nations like Greece, let's see if this would excite you. If you're over in Greece, and they said, this nation, don't worry, it's got enough in reserve to hold off a collapse for months. Oh, well, if it's that far off, let's go to Disney World. The arrogance of these governments and the rating agencies that saying, oh, don't worry about it, we can buy a few extra months. The arrogance to think that that's going to make people happy. The politicians, the governments, the global agendas, they have all stole the future of the children in Greece, the freedom in Ireland, the freedom here. I mean, what happens when it all breaks down? I've said before, and in the last year I've been harping on this a lot, everything you know, everything you think you can trust is about to change. The paradigm is changing. Is this the beginning? How bad will it get? If Europe comes crashing down, what happens to us? How do people who have been lied to, who have had their children's future stolen, how do they react? In the next hour, Sharo's not here, but I have assembled a group of experts, and I want you to ask yourself, which is the most likely scenario? Everything is fine. Second scenario, we're headed for a depression in Europe, and the rest of the world will be hit hard, but we'll get through it, and things will remain the way they've always been, or have been for the last 100 years. Or revolution, insurrection. That's what the communists are calling it over in Europe, the coming insurrection. It is imperative that you look beyond the headlines and you see what is coming in Europe and how it plays out, because I think Europe is ahead of us, and the same exact seeds have been planted here in America. I ask you tonight, look to the future of Greece and of Europe so we may prevent it from being our future as well. Neil Ferguson, he is the professor of Harvard, professor of history at Harvard, and the author of The Ascent of Money. Damon Vickers, chief investment officer at 9 Points Capital Partners. His fund rose some 63% in 2008. And Brian Doherty, he is the senior editor at Reason Magazine and Reason.com, also the author of a great book, Radicals for Capitalism. Okay, I guess let me start here, and let me start with you, Neil, on let the American people in on how bad things are in Greece. What is it like in Greece?
Well, we kind of assume that these countries like Greece, and you can add in Portugal and Ireland and Spain, that's why we use the acronym PIGS, because they are in pretty much the same substance that you'll find most pigs. They have spiraling unemployment, rocketing deficits, and the markets no longer believe that their politicians can possibly pay off the debts that they've racked up before and during the economic crisis. And just as some of us predicted, no sooner did they try to start balancing the budget, and the Greeks have got to get their deficit down from 13% to 3% in 3 years, then, of course, the public sector workers went on strike and took to the streets. So we've got people in the streets of Athens today, and I should imagine tomorrow, too. The country's going to grind to a halt, and their only hope, really, is that their old friends, the Germans, will bail them out. That is now Greece's economic policy, handouts from Germany.
Okay, so now, if I'm not mistaken, and just seeing the things that I've read in the paper here recently, Damon, the people that are in the streets now are the labor unions, because they have Greece has expanded the role of government. There are so many government workers now that the unions are saying, no, we didn't make the mistake. The government officials, the politicians lied to the people. Why should our employees take the hit for this? Right? And so they won't take any cuts.
They don't want to take the cuts. I think momentarily we're going to hear about cars being turned over and fires in the streets. I mean, it looks like a potential revolution beginning in Europe.
We were talking before we went on the air, and I said, and I want to get, Brian, I want to get your thought on this, and Neil, I want to talk to you about this as well. So let me start here, and then we'll go around. Before we went on, I talked to you about The Coming Insurrection, book that is from Europe. It's communist. They say, hey, we were going for this socialist utopia. You politicians lied to us. They basically got in. We're going to have this socialist utopia. You won't do it. They're unveiling themselves now as real communists and saying, then we'll do it. And that's the coming insurrection. When I told you this story, you said you were driving in the car here.
That's funny.
Yeah, and you were writing down notes, things that came to your head, and what happened?
Yeah, I mean, you do an interview like this, and doing interviews with you are kind of intense. And a little bit. So I'm trying to condense, really what's going on in the world. We're all trying to figure it out. What's going on in Europe? How does this play into the United States? Where are things likely unfolding? Where maybe are we headed? And if you get a disintegration of all the systems and the checks and balances and the unions uprising because they're not getting enough bennies, and Greece is 10% of the whole 10% of the whole population works for the government. I mean, who wouldn't have a revolution against this giant tumor of an enterprise that is sucking the life out of the economy? 1/3 of the people don't opt in and pay income taxes in Greece. The average family pays $2,500 a year in bribes just to get things done. And there's a break in the trust between the citizen and the government. And so the governments keep lying, westernized governments keep lying to their citizenry around the world. And this developing unrest, and the bankers and the Wall Street and the mortgages, and people getting squeezed more and more. And here comes the austerity programs announced by Greece yesterday, that they're going to hike taxes, and at the same time, they're going to freeze wages. If you're a Greek citizen right now, you got to be just livid.
So, Brian, first of all, do you agree or disagree with the idea that there's massive civil unrest headed our way?
Sure,
Not our
yeah.
way, but in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, the Greeks, whom I love, do have a tendency to take to the streets in very violent ways when they're upset, in a way that we in the U.S. don't do. I mean, I get why, the lefty kids who read books like that book, The Coming Insurrection, the European dream is like, get a not very well-paying government public sector union job, hold on to it for dear life, living in a country that's like 36% less productive than America, poorer. I mean, they've got a lot of nice old buildings, but it's